Architecture is really the art and science of turning fiction into fact.
Sometimes kind of real architectural life interferes with intellectual architectural life.
There is no such thing as architecture.
Hello everyone, this is Gundula Proksch and you are listening to Architecture Talk. Each week we have a conversation with a contemporary thinker on issues of architecture and architectural thinking, and what we're interested in is advancing the frontier of what architecture is and what it might be tomorrow. Today I'm talking to my colleague here at the University of Washington, Professor Gundula Proksch, who has recently published a book on the ideas and technologies of urban agriculture. Urban agriculture, of course, is an important nascent science which is poised to transform the very nature of how we think about living in cities and what the culture of an urban life is. Here's the conversation. So first of all, welcome to Architecture Talk. You have just published what seems to me to be a fantastic book called Creating Urban Agricultural Systems, an Integrated Approach to Design. And I have had some opportunity to flick through it. And it seems extremely scientific and well detailed. Beautifully graphic design. I love your diagrams. And they seem very explanatory, even to a person without much of a science background like me. So congratulations for that. But let's nevertheless back out. Why should we care about urban agriculture? I mean, obviously we want to do better agriculture and more organic and more sustainable. We could just do better rural agriculture. So why should we care about urban agriculture?
I see it as this opportunity to, in this whole sustainability movement, and very connected to architecture actually.
Yeah.
Why would an architect write this book?
Right.
There's this enormous interest, and my intention is really to explain it. That's why it's so technical, so that people can creatively integrate it into their design.
Okay.
Right? So this was really written for designers to understand it better, to be actually creative.
Okay.
And it's this opportunity, when you think about it, agriculture needs the same things, or cares about the same things as architecture. On the technical side, right, we need to keep water out, agriculture need to bring water in. We need energy, sunlight, daylight, right? These are these rudimentary things. We're more and more concerned with closed loop cycles. Right? Natural nutrient cycle should be closed.
Right.
We destroyed this. Most of our waste goes to landfills.
Right.
And so we're not closing the loop. And so there, on the technical side, there are similarities, what you care out, and it's a great opportunity on a very small scale often to close the loop in cities.
Yeah.
But then you have to also think about this entire cultural component. Right? We care about that.
Yeah.
And architecture, a lot of it is a cultural meaning, what we care as educators and architects about, to bring that into our communities, into cities.
Sure.
And so I see it almost as a similar microcosm
between architecture
and urban agriculture.
And urban agriculture.
So similar things. So no wonder that so many architects are very interested in urban agriculture.
Why are so many architects interested in urban agriculture? Tell me.
It's this wanting to connect the two that we learned, at least we learned in our education, are separate. But history shows that previously architects have thought much more about the integration of both.
Give me an example from history where urban agriculture and architecture were more...
Frank Lloyd's right. But also urban planning had a lot to do with urban agriculture. Le Corbusier, right? Well, he brought it into his plans as well, like that every family should have a garden. And
he did?
Yes, he did.
Corbusier did?
Very interesting work by Work AC in New York. They have this 49 cities, and they research basically urban plants
Right.
and how they integrated urban agriculture.
I see.
And so Le Corbusier has part of that in his,
ideas.
yeah.
Oh,
So-
that's fantastic
Yeah,
to know.
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it will show it to you. But, so it was there.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of blended it out, the whole movement of land use separation, of identifying zones of different uses in cities.
Discrete uses, yes.
And so agriculture moved out.
Right,
out
because
of
we thought
minds.
it was ugly and it was polluting, it was noisy.
Exactly.
So what has changed?
And
Why
so
do we not
I
think
think
it's
with-
ugly and polluting anymore?
Looking at sustainability,
Right.
as much more integrated systems. People are interested in that again, and of course the grassroots movement for healthier food.
Yeah.
I think a lot of developments play together that people all of a sudden, I mean not so sudden, I found 10 years ago that there was this critical interest, especially here with the Year of Urban Agriculture. in the
Here
city
you
of
mean our
Seattle.
university, yes, Seattle.
No, the city
Yeah.
of Seattle.
Yeah.
Right. The mayor declared 2010 the Year of Urban Agriculture.
Oh, he did?
He did. So that was when
Do we have urban agriculture in Seattle other than pea pods?
pea patches,
Yeah.
the regulation for how many chickens you could have,
Yeah.
and how you can sell produce you produce in your garden.
Yeah.
So it was on that level, but they had also changed the regulation to allow for greenhouses on rooftops, which New York has and Seattle tried to implement. I don't think it's very successful yet. I haven't found any successful application of additional building height through a up to 15 feet high greenhouse. But all these things were put in place so that Seattle wants to be at the forefront of a lot of innovative urban developments. So that was great. And we had our BE lab in that year.
That's right.
That was when I realized, working with students and having lots of conversation with practitioners, that this was a really big thing.
Tell us, we are slowly making progress in Seattle. We've got a few things. We've got a few chickens. We've got pea patches and so on. But just blue sky this for me. Imagine, what is your sense of the future city where there is urban agriculture maximus? What happens there?
I would say the main thing in my mind is diversity, right? The beauty of urban agriculture, it could be anything.
Yeah.
This word has so many facets. It describes community gardens,
Right.
which are super important for communities to grow, to a high-tech greenhouse on a rooftop,
Hydroponic.
all computer controlled.
Digitally controlled, yes.
And so that range is possible. And I would want a city that engages in all of them.
Why in all of them? Why not
Because-
just have super efficient hydroponic farms?
To a certain degree, it produces enormous amounts of food, but
Yeah.
they also at a relatively high price point, right? So
Hydroponics? That's expensive?
hydroponics generate a lot of produce,
Right.
but they also need a lot of energy,
Right.
Depending on the climate.
Right, I
So
see.
when you have to heat,
Right.
it's the same as a building.
Uh-huh.
There are a lot of different positions, sometimes food miles, right? The distance food travels
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
brought to us from California
Yeah.
is a big no-no.
No, I
But then when
understand.
you actually make the mass with greenhouse operation, it has also a carbon footprint.
No, but I'm saying within the city.
Yeah,
within
so-
the city, we are imagining the future city.
Yes, so there's this full range of assessment always in flux. Right? It's not one is better than the other. But what I think this integration of a diversity of practices would bring is different groups have benefits, right? The very first produce generated in a hydroponic or better even aquaponic, where the nutrients are recycled,
Right.
right, with fish farming. And then potentially this gets sold primarily through Whole Foods or high-end supermarkets.
Right.
But then also the community impact. So I think when people get more in sync with the food production on multiple levels, it's a benefit.
Right.
These more resource intensive operations like greenhouses generate also jobs, urban jobs. So it's, I think, by diversifying, having different operations, different impacts on different groups, that's where it's really interesting.
And in general, it seems to me what you're suggesting is that diversity of food sources is a good idea anyway,
Yes.
because you don't want to develop, depend on a single system, because all systems have their problems and dangers. So diversity of system, sort of hedges against that, and also it puts, I feel, access and control and proximity to food sources to a diversity of populations in a different ways. I think it's really good idea to have 2 chickens in your backyard, but also it might be a good idea to have some hydroponically grown tomatoes, which you don't necessarily have to run your own data software on, but some nerds might want to do it.
Exactly.
So I mean, I think a diversity, what I'm hearing you say is would help create a stronger sense of a culture. Okay, but let me just play devil's advocate a little bit. We all talk about eating wild fish versus farmed fish. You had mentioned fish farms earlier, right? There's all this discussion about all this dumping of salmon in Puget Sound recently. There was this controversy and so on. Is there any concern in this kind of urban agricultural super scientified thinking about, are we going to lose some of the inherent unknown values of simply doing old-fashioned agriculture with soil?
No.
No.
I think within the movement itself,
Right.
we have different groups and positions.
Okay.
So Work AC group, the architecture firm in New York,
Yeah.
all their work is based on soil. Very speculative project to a certain degree.
Okay.
And they say, we don't want hydroponic. We believe that food has to be grown in soil.
Okay. Why do they believe that?
Because they believe that the cultural component is an important thing. So their main project, build project, they have a lot of very interesting speculative work around urban agriculture, but their most interesting and acclaimed build work is for edible schoolyard.
Edible schoolyard?
Yeah, the edible schoolyard project from Alice Water in San Francisco or Oakland, then went national.
I see.
And so the New York-based group, their goal is to implement a prototype of an edible schoolyard in each borough. So the first one was...
No, but what is an edible schoolyard? Tell us.
Edible schoolyard is
Yes.
what it is. Edible schoolyard is a project implemented several years ago, more than a decade ago, by Alice Water, acclaimed chef. The legend is she walked by a deserted property next to a schoolyard to her restaurant. And then she said, let's turn that into a school garden. With the help of the teachers and parents and other people in the community, transformed this into a ecological, very productive garden. And since she is a chef, the school kitchen was also reclaimed. And so the kids grow, the students grow
their own food,
vegetable, and then eat it. They learn how to cook it and so on.
and they might think vegetables are good things other than processed McDonald's hamburgers. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So this is the cultural component, and Work AC works closely with Edible Schoolyard Project. That is what all their projects believe in. This cultural component.
Could we imagine a future in where it is required to grow your own food, at least to a certain percentage? Everyone?
Yes, absolutely. I think.
Why not?
Yes, it
You
could
must
be.
generate certain amount of energy.
Yes.
You must recycle and compost.
yes.
And you must grow a little bit of your food.
The Living Future Challenge has that as a component, as a mandate. It's, I think, not yet worked out. It's very in its first steps, but yes, I think so. I see it as another sustainability measure right?
But it's more than sustainability. It's sort of life culture measure also,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like, it's not just about
Cultural sustainability.
Cultural sustainability,
You know, it's
right?
all interwoven. And I think, coming back to your question about the soil-grown agriculture, we all love farms.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
We have this picture in our mind that a farmer goes and grows vegetable, and certain very small farms that are the ones that struggle most do that still, right?
Right.
Ecological farm here, we visit pumpkin patches with our kids, right?
Yeah.
This romantic idea of growing in the soil. And this is, of course, fantastic. What is the thing that is not fantastic is the industrial agriculture,
Right.
which is basically destroying those small farms.
Right.
And that's where the problem lies, that industrial agriculture, which we rely mostly on, and I don't have the numbers, but I think only 2% of all the farms are these small family-run farms,
Right.
and they struggle. These industrial farms take over and use practices that are
Right.
very destructive to the environment. And urban agriculture could be almost seen as this case study for more integrated approaches to farming on all levels, right? Recycling of nutrients, that the industrial agriculture can learn from.
Yeah, no, so in fact, what I'm imagining you say is that urban agriculture, if it is done in a distributed, small-scale manner, can be thought of as the future of the small farm, where everybody has their own little small farm as part of their day and evening job.
Yes and no. We discussed that a lot with all the
Why not?
designers.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I mean, would you have the time to do this?
No, it's not a question of time. It's a question of, you're sort of expected and required to do it. I didn't have time for recycling and composting. But I've learned to do it.
I mean, yes, I think it, but I think also the culture of what value we put to agriculture, of, generation of food. I think that's one, the slow food movement, right, coming from Europe, especially Italy, is so important. You've probably seen it even change in the time you've been here in Seattle.
Yeah.
I have friends that were in Vancouver, BC, 40 years ago, and they said it was terrible, and now everybody is just all in odds with like Vancouver's food culture or Seattle's food culture, right? So it is a drastic cultural change, and all this contributes to that. Still, because we have this enormous food industry that produces at a very low cost very unhealthy food.
Yeah, but
this is where I
of
think
course there are resistances.
the biggest change could happen.
But I'm looking for paradigm shifts. I mean, before the iPhone, nobody felt they needed an iPhone, and the moment we had that, everything else was game over. So anyway, this would be a good point for us to take a break. We are talking to Gundula Proksch, and we are discussing, it seems, the future of urban agricultural systems.
Hello everyone, thanks for listening to Architecture Talk. We release a new conversation every other Wednesday. So, if you're enjoying this conversation, please do be sure to visit our website and to check out some of the earlier conversations. From the website, you can also subscribe to this podcast and you can listen to the other episodes. You can also simply directly subscribe to us via Spotify or via the podcast app. And of course, we are available to be heard via any of the other podcasting apps that are available on the internet, such as Stitcher, Overcast, etc. We would also love to hear from you if you have any questions or just some comments, or even have a suggestion for a future episode. You can reach us via the contacts page on architecturetalk.org. Thank you for listening again.
Hello, this is Vikram Prakash, and you are listening to Architecture Talk, and we are in the middle of a fascinating conversation with Gundula Proksch on urban agricultural systems. So, Gundula, we were talking about what it could be to imagine this great future city with superb, distributed, multi-layered, diverse urban farming lifestyle. You know, it's going to be a new lifestyle thing for the millennials. I'm hoping. You know, will be Tinder, and then there'll be urban agriculture. It's be about the same thing. What do we do about meat? Is that possible also to grow as urban? What would it be called? Urban animal husbandry?
That's not so much my research, but it also, of course, integrates. I think.
I mean, we need meat, right?
We need meat, but we need much less meat. And
so you're imagining a future with much less meat. I mean, just now we consume a lot.
If we are environmentally conscious, we should reduce it. The water footprint, the energy footprint, CO2 exhaust of any animal husbandry, especially beef, it's enormous. With, again, the food industry just producing it regulated, but in large quantities. These impacts are, of course, really, really large. So I think, so there have been many small farms have integrated very, very small livestock, so chicken, as we said.
I'm just thinking, Gundula, in the old days in medieval European cities, there were animals everywhere. They were slaughtered and cleaned and cooked. And
absolutely.
It was not a weird or strange thing, was it?
No, they had to have the cows close to the city because they couldn't cool the milk. Otherwise, they couldn't have consumed. We wouldn't have been able to consume milk in the cities.
That's right, no refrigeration.
So, yes, no refrigeration. And yes, from that point of view, yes. Yeah, I think there are very speculative projects on that issue with, pig farms or something in cities. Yeah. But I don't think that I haven't looked into that.
You haven't looked into that, but I think it's a fascinating kind of area to imagine, and I think we still have a kind of a cultural prohibition against that issue. It's considered to be unclean, disease-producing. We require much higher level of probably management than we are willing to trust local level citizenry to. But I think it's a good and important question. But anyway, moving on. So one of your chapters is on water and the impact this has on that. And you have noticed that, I don't know what the number was, like 60% of all the water consumed is by the agricultural.
70% globally.
70% globally. 70% globally. And you showed these, what are they called? Closed system diagrams, in which there is a lot of water which is, moved around and so on. It sort of reminds me of, it reminds me of Biosphere, and B, it reminds me of one of my most favorite films, The Martian, with Matt Damon, right? Which I just saw with my son, where, he's stranded on Mars and then he has to make water. And then, of course, he grows his plants in poop and Martian soil and has difficulty about this. So we talk about, harvesting water and how that would affect architecture and cities and urban design and planning. But is this this whole system of not only harvesting water and reusing stormwater, but do you imagine a future in which we sort of grow water and collect water?
Absolutely. Like in our McKinley Future Studio, Kenyokem, one team imagined inhabiting Mars.
Aha.
So they did
so
exactly
we're going to
that,
Mars.
yeah.
Okay.
And set up all the steps necessary.
Yeah.
Yes. So what I think on a much larger level for now Earth, it's the food, water, energy nexus to close that and see these relationships that can occur. Right. So the ability of certain types of urban agriculture to operate as green infrastructure, right? So mitigation, what you mentioned, but then also, of course, developing food systems or food production systems that use much less water, right? So hydroponics, closed loop, aquaponic systems have like a tons of water needs than a regular system.
That's right.
And so that is, I think, the interesting component that also relates really well to architecture and how we build cities.
Yeah.
The issue why these numbers are so enormously high, like 70% of all fresh water that we consume is used in agriculture, is because the irrigation system used globally are so inefficient in many places.
You're talking about industrial agricultural systems or traditional agricultural systems? Both?
Both. But, you know, with the expansion of agriculture everywhere, in areas where farming is really hard, and when you overuse it, the water is pumped out, aquifers dry up, water levels drop. So that is this critical component which globally threatens agriculture. Because we won't be able to operate this way. But it's not just developing countries that have this issue. They often have that because they don't have the means of investing into more efficient systems. But California,
of course.
A lot of
huge
the
water
and what we grow, right? So some crops need just much, much more water than others. So the consciousness about how much water we produce and consume uses to be grown and further developed
world. So, but you know, with modernism, water, not with modernism, sort of a modern society, water was kind of made into this magical thing which magically showed up out of a tap. And somehow that was considered to be a tremendous advancement in society. And I suppose it is. I'm very grateful to have water show up out of my tap. And I compare it to, you know, I don't know, slum infrastructure in India where, you know, you have to port water from the well and you have to walk 5 miles or 3 miles. But in the old world, you know, there was the aquifer which filled the well and you sent a bucket down it and you brought up the water and you carried it home. So you knew what water was, what it was worth, where it came from, and its relationship to the aquifers. So I'm wondering if that is an important ethic, not that old system, but if it's an important ethic to bring back in what you are saying, and what that might look like in a future urban water-conscious architecture and lifestyle.
I think a lot of these systems, especially in urban agriculture, since this will never produce as much food, any intervention in cities as the urban population needs. But all of those interventions should have an educational component, right? Once you know about, for example, here's a water footprint, it's, I think, a fascinating graphic.
Right. Well, people, listeners can't look at this, so you'd better tell us what we are looking at.
So this is a poster or research generated that gives the amount of water needed to grow certain types of produce. And if we are more conscious about how much the food we consume uses or requires, we are much more conscious about what we eat, potentially. But this whole idea of water recycling, water collection can be brought into buildings, into urban space much more
tangibly,
and
visibly. I mean, I imagine this future where, you know, you can see your rainwater being collected, where you can see, you know, where if you were enjoined to produce your own water, or at least some of it, even if it was through, you know, capturing transpiration or evaporation of some kind, you could see the water droplets forming. It's the magical moment in the film The Martian where he walks in and he sees, you know, condensation all over the plastic. For my son, that was a great moment. He was like, oh my God, you know, you can make water. And that water is just not this free commodity. That could be quite a cultural transformation of the same magnitude of the kind it was a cultural transformation to have water show up magically out of a tap, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's something to continue to think about in the future. So there's food, so there's water.
Yeah, so large research efforts looks at this nexus of food, water, and energy to solve, obviously, with climate change, a lot of the global issues about security of all three, right? And so how those work together. And again, the food production brings them all together very visibly, because we all understand that if there's no water, there's no food. And so,
and if there's no energy, can we grow food without energy?
As long as we have the sun, that's our energy source.
That's our energy source,
So it's only if it moves into very technical realm, then the energy is supplemented.
Right.
And I haven't found any project that makes that more efficiently than the sun.
You have a whole section on energy.
Yes.
So how are you sort of connecting the question of energy to...
So my point, looking in this book at urban systems and building integrated systems, right? There's a lot of material written, researched on community gardens.
Right.
So bringing it a little bit more into the technical realm, I found interesting. And so the place where we historically connect buildings and growing are greenhouses.
Right, of course.
And so a portion of the energy section is on how we think about this relationship or what the underlying criteria are for greenhouses.
Right.
To, as a designer, again, understand this much more, to then more creatively work with that.
Yeah.
And another really interesting issue that came up while I was researching this book, and I was not sure if I wanted this in my book because I was struggling with, is basically electrical lighting for LED. With LED technology, there is an explosion of indoor farming that uses only LED light, electric lighting.
So in basement you can grow?
In basements.
Yeah.
And so it is really a strong movement because of this new technology available that farms can now operate in places you would never imagined.
I see.
And to their claim, at least, feasibly.
Right.
So the most interesting place are unused subway tunnels or tube tunnels in London.
Right.
And there's a small group that grows micro sprouts for high-end restaurants in London.
What does LED have that can, versus other light that can allow?
LED, as you know, uses much less electricity and doesn't generate the same heat. So the historically used light in greenhouses had to be relatively far away from the plants.
I see.
So that they don't heat up too much.
I see.
They were often, if you grow in a climate like here,
so it's cool light.
Yes. You can basically put the plants right next to the LEDs. They actually intersperse sometimes LED strips with tomato plants.
Yeah.
So there is almost no distance required. And with this idea, we talked about the hydroponic greenhouses that generate leafy greens that need to be harvested and consumed right away. The fresher you get it, the better for the urban market. There has been a push to have those indoor farms also in urban environments.
I see.
Japan is big on it. They call them plant factories. And they are at the forefront of this. Very little known to us here that they have been in this market much longer than US cities have.
Right. Okay, but again, as we start moving towards the end here, when I start thinking of these massive, all these farms with LED and tomato alternating strips, and I think of, we only start growing everything that we need. We need tomatoes and cabbage and lettuce, and do we need to supplement this world of monocultural, mono food production thinking with an equal alternate world which ensures chaos and who knows what's going to happen in the natural world also, right? I mean, there has to be, I think it's important to balance a well-controlled, super efficient, well-managed, human-focused world with more of the natural world where we don't really know what's going on. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in the realm of urban agriculture, the diversity, as I said, is important.
It's key.
And in like the larger vision, I'm really interested in projects that speculate about how the natural system and the built system merge even further.
Or are kept apart,
Or kept apart, but this idea that we can grow architecture or we can produce, let matter generate. We are close with many construction materials, right? But that visionary thinking going beyond something that is purely technical. So letting the biological component take a stronger part in the generation of whatever we generate.
Right.
I think it's important. And at the moment, it's still in the realm of very small project experiments and visions, but it changes also our mindset, how we think about certain things. I think that's where I think much more of our research should go.
I know, I agree. I mean, because we are hearing a lot about bioengineering, about how we'll get bioengineered meats, we'll get, bioengineered livers and kidneys, and of course, better medicines and things like that. But with that comes the alarm bells about, are we going to completely bioengineer ourselves? We're going to have bioengineered wombs. Are we all going to become bioengineered? Similarly, if you let me get away with it, I will bioengineer the entire food industry into something, right? We've already done it. Is a bioengineered future inevitable? I mean, it seems to me it is. At least in the human and animal organ world. What are your thoughts on that?
I think in the realm of the built environment, right, we have always...
Bioengineered buildings. Yeah, let's talk about bioengineered architecture.
No, but our construction materials, right? We've grown. We have, or in all fields of horticulture.
That's right.
We have engineered plants, maybe not bioengineered, what we consider today bioengineering, but we have cultivated all kinds of hybrids of all kinds of grafted plants. And so thinking about this, of that tradition in sense of engineering with biology, I'm more thinking about the realm of the constructed environment. That is, I think, a really interesting and should continue, so that the construction materials are renewable, made from renewable material with a much stronger focus on biological processes that generate it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you certainly made me realize that actually our buildings are significantly bioengineered already, because all the 2x4 construction, all the wood construction, or even the manufactured wood constructions, these are all bioengineered products. We call it farmed or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So I never thought about that most of our structures are already very bioengineered. So as we move ahead, we're going to get rid of all the drywall and everything and make everything bioengineered. But we still put things together as if we are carpenters and sculptors. Whereas perhaps we need to think about putting buildings together like growing organs.
Yeah, so Rachel Armstrong's work,
Okay.
she looks at matter, how self-organization, self-generation of materials can work. And she looks currently at a very, very small scale, but potentially could expand to a much, much larger scale. So the
Give me an example, yeah.
the physical, she has a system developed that bacteria could create very structural substances that could potentially be the new foundation of Venice.
Right.
So this is
Yes.
the most fascinating, I think, where she makes a scale jump of, microscopic growth could actually lift an entire or secure an entire city.
And they're also talking about oyster texture. Have you heard about that?
Yes.
On the outskirts of Manhattan as a surge protection system, because there used to be these huge oyster beds in Manhattan.
Yes.
So there's oyster texture. There is microbial foundations, and one imagines that one will have to sort of think about living in a different way. I mean, if we are willing to give up the rectilinearity of architecture and give up Le Corbusier's domino, if we can, then we might be able to live more, literally, Frank Lloyd Wright, organically.
Yeah. A lot of projects that we are aware of, right, that have been generated are all fascinated by the formal language of organic shapes and matter.
Right.
But don't have any substance of how it's actually generated.
Right.
But very recent research does, and I think that's where the interesting advances will be.
It gives a new meaning to the word treehouse, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it's not about making a silly thing in a tree. It's about learning to live in a tree. It's been a pleasure talking to you,
Thank you so
Gundula.
much, Vikram.
Thank you so much for being on Architecture Talk.
Thank you very much for listening to Architecture Talk. This is Vikram Proksch. I am the host of the show, and our show's producer is Elizabeth Umbenhauer. If you like the show, please do remember to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And also take a moment and rate us on iTunes. Thank you very much, and see you next time.